Hi everyone, good evening. How are you guys doing? Guys, am I audible? I'm not keeping very well, guys. I have a bit of fever, so might not be able to speak with full energy today. But that's okay. Good to be here as always. But anyway, guys, I got a lot of requests from you guys personally on my personal Slack, right? Um, that having two classes on one day in the weekend is getting very tough. Is that the case with everyone? So I got at least 15 people from your batch reaching out to me, right? Because so guys, just to understand the concern, is the concern that it gets too much to take in? Guys, is that the case? If you can tell, right? And maybe you don't get the time to revise after that. Is that the case? I see. I see. Folks, fine. What we can start doing is, since I want, since we are going slow, covering every concept in detail, that's why I was trying to arrange these extra classes as much as possible. So what I'm going to do now is we will avoid having these things. One more news I wanted to give everyone. I will be taking React for you, at least starting next week. We will be starting React together. So I have been able to make some time at least, because my opinion was when I started front end, I'll try to, get it to the end, and then Node and everything else might be taken up by some other instructor or howsoever it goes. I've also made a request that I would like to still interact with the batch at least on weekends if that's possible. But I think that will start working once the DSA classes, they kind of shift to the week, right? So yeah, that's it. That's the news that I wanted to give you. Ajay, with React and DSA possible nahi hoga. See, problem is these people are trying to expedite your placements, right? ताकि आप सब जल्दी place हो सकें. Right? In the sense that for that, for typically for startups, for a lot of industrial jobs, React is a very core skill. React and JavaScript are very core skills, right? So with that in mind, I think if we are able to cover React, that will add more value, right? I'm certainly not saying that DSA is not important. In fact, I place the highest emphasis on it. But I understand, Mayank. I understand, Mayank. That's what I'm trying to get at. So the way we will work out is next week. Nahi, Rahul, yaar, I understand. Okay, are you guys not enjoying the DSA classes? Is that the case? Can everyone tell me? Nahi enjoy kar rahe. Right? No, if no is the answer. Oh my. Guys, I had no idea that. What are you guys learning right now? Abhi kya padha rahe hain? Okay, is it the basic? Ravi says nothing. Is it the basic of Java? Is that the case? Okay. I see. I see. Okay, I see. कुछ समझ नहीं आ रहा. नहीं, आदम कुछ नहीं मिस किया. Just trying to understand. बहुत सारे लोगों ने मैसेज किया था that 2 classes in a weekend is not working for them. Hectic हो रहा है बहुत. अजय यार, प्रॉब्लम ये है कि मुझे आपका रिएक्ट भी लेना है, राइट? सो आई एम ट्राइंग टू मेक टाइम ताकि मैं आपका रिएक्ट ले लो एटलीस्ट, राइट? बट रिएक्ट एंड डीएसए साथ में लेना तो पॉसिबल ही नहीं है ना यार. इज you are understanding my point, right? So I have just made some sort of time to take React for you, but React and DSC कैसे लें साथ में? That's a problem, नहीं? So JavaScript थोड़ा सा hard जा रहा है. If you can teach us, then we can manage. ठीक है पंकज, let me take these inputs. धीरज यार, टाइम बहुत लगने वाला है आपका रिएक्ट में ना. इट्स as you some of you might know कि थोड़ा कॉम्प्लेक्स है वो. जुबैर, आई अंडरस्टैंड यार, क्या करें यार. ये जैसे के बाद रिएक्ट लिया तो नहीं चलेगा क्या? आपको प्लेसमेंट के लिए प्रिपेयर होने में इट विल टेक मोर टाइम अजय, because see the intention is quickly get everyone the skills which are important for placements, right? और इस टाइम पे स्टार्टअप्स जो मिड स्मॉल टू मिड साइज कंपनीज हैं, राइट, उन लोगों को सबको जावास्क्रिप्ट एंड रिएक्ट चाहिए. So if we are able to build good skill there, at least our job is secure, right? And then what we have to do is then we have to work our way up, right? Because again, for the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, and all these big companies, DSA is of paramount importance. हाँ धीरज, अगर आप सिर्फ इनमें, पवन आई विल आंसर दैट, 2 मिनट देना. अगर आप you're able to build good skill, right, in these things, in JavaScript, in React, right? So getting a job should not be that big a problem. Right now, the industry demand is extremely high for both these skills. And maybe that's why Newton School is working, towards getting you these skills first, right? अपने को क्या करना है guys, अगर अपने को first job secure करनी है, right, we have to be very good with JS, we have to be very good with React, and we'll be able to secure at least first job, right? But if we want to secure, if we want to crack big jobs, right, the Amazons and the Googles, then we have to become extremely good with DSA, right? Do you guys understand what I'm trying to tell you? Right? So the intention is this, guys. That's why even, I suggest that I will be taking the React classes, right? So I'm taking React for you, I'm taking JS for you, right? What after React? React के बाद they will be taking Node. That will not be me, but someone will be teaching you Node. पीयूष भाई, सही में ट्राई कर रहा हूँ. DSA भी देखो, सॉरी React भी देखो. Just आप लोगों के लिए ही I just try to figure out some time. So main reason that currently we are learning JS with you and simultaneously ma'am is taking DSA in Java, but again not scratch. Okay, got it, Sweta. So will you teach React at the last only, sir? No, Ajit, I'll be starting React next week, in fact. Placement should start in the final week of February for you guys. Final week of February, start early March, something like that. I mean, will you teach after React? Unlikely, Ajit, unlikely. I want to close till React nicely so that all of the front end part is covered entirely by me and no one else, right? That's the intention. Okay. Okay, guys, with Sir Raj class, कोई problem नहीं है, Mayank. I know a lot of you guys have reached out to me today. At least 15 people have reached out to me. Alag. No, hang on guys, 1 second. Saying that thoda sa overloading ho raha hai sabke liye, right? Having 2 things in a day. So Mayank, the way I think about addressing is today at least, we will not cover any deep concept. Okay? What we can do is so that we will cover just one concept. Okay? And we'll try to keep it a short session. So we'll quickly get over with this and we'll learning will continue. Rahega. Does that work for all? Short class, not very heavy concepts. Does that work, guys? I completely understand 2 classes is unreal in a day. Okay, ठीक है. तो guys जल्दी से पढ़ते हैं. पूछो मैं क्वेश्चन पूछो आप. What is the question, man? I'm waiting for your question, yeah. Where is true plus true star 3? Okay. Okay, so Mayank is asking us a question where he says where is true plus true star 3, right? This is Mayank's question. Okay, so can anyone help me understand this? So what is the first thing we should think about when we are doing this question? Right? Okay, some people have already given the correct answer, but okay, let's understand very quickly what is happening here. Okay, guys, since this is 3 multiplied by something, right? So basically we are performing an operation of mathematics on Boolean, right? So what JavaScript is going to do is it's going to take its numeric value, right? What is the numeric value of true? True is 1, right? So 3 into true will be 3, right? Similarly, ab kya hoga? Ab this is in addition with 2 truths, right? So again, the value of true, since this is a plus operator, JavaScript will typecast this, right? Type coercion, upcast the type, anything you can say. And again, this will be 1. So what will be the final answer? Right, 5. And chalo, chala ke bhi dekh lete hain. I do this. What is the value of A is 5. So we have a correct answer. मैं समझ आ गया आपको? ठीक है, बढ़िया. Right? Sir, I am Java versus Python. Okay, yes, Pawan, I will answer your question. What do you want to know? Java versus Python. What is the exact questioning? But दोबारा लिख दो. Pawan, question to bolo bhai. Java versus Python is a big debate. In what context? Are you talking about industrial context? Are you talking about language performance? There is no preference for language. मैंने पहले भी बोला है guys to a lot of you, language is not so much of a preference, right? As long as you know JS, right? You can learn DSA with anything, right? DSA, guys, is a concept, correct? तो उसको JS में लिखो, Python में लिखो, Java में लिखो, doesn't really matter, right? Java versus Python, as long as you're good with one language, in interview you can clearly call out, right? And most places it's going to be JS, right? Because every small startup, every small company, what are they going to do, right? They are going to, what are they going to do, guys? They are going to have a web page. They are going to have a front end, right? So for the point of placement, these 2 things become very important for us. Right? Then why are we using JS instead of? I don't have an answer for that, Rabia. I don't know why that is the case. विकास आप मुझे पर्सनली पिंग करना. Yes, Ajit. I don't know, Ajit, why that is the case. Why we are not taking data structures in JS. I think that is the case, Dheeraj. I just didn't want to say that because जिन लोगों को DSA बहुत अच्छा आता है, they are usually using Java or C++ to do that, right? So the problem is, guys, in the industry, if I were to be very open with you, Java, C++ expertise is very prevalent, है ना? ये दो languages हैं जो लोगों को आता है, but JS is a language जो लोगों को नहीं आता है, right? या फिर गलत आता है. DSA, when you're doing, you need precision. Okay? You need exactness of solution, right? So most people are not able to write JavaScript like that, guys. This is the honest problem, right? Because people learn JavaScript in a very, the word is jugaad way. So they're not able to pull off at least complex data structures. But right. हाँ विकास, आप मुझे पिंग कर देना स्लैक पे. Now we are going to start. ठीक है? I just want to cover two concepts with you, fairly important ones, and we'll have a quick session, right? ठीक है? We'll use Ajay's question which he has asked to do a revision. ठीक है? Do a revision of what we've learned in the last class. सिर्जुल, अगर आप अच्छे से पढ़ाई कर लोगे तो बिल्कुल मिलेगा. Okay. Let's understand this, guys. ठीक है? Are we all looking at this? Okay. So, guys, what is going to happen is, see, the moment JavaScript reads these three set timeouts, what is it going to do? So, see, this is how I try to understand these things. So, assume they were in a function which is called run, right? And then we called run like this, correct? Right? So what is going to happen is JavaScript is going to run through all of these things, right? Okay, JavaScript sees, hey, this is set timeout, this is set timeout, this is set timeout. So I move all of them to the browser, right? So the browser is going to take the ownership of them. I say three, I see three, I push it in my execution stack and I immediately print it, right? Then what happens is these three are there, right? So this guy is going to make its way to the execution, to the queue, right? Which we have learned in the last class immediately, correct? Within 0 seconds, right? So next, this guy is going to come. Finally, this will make its way. So this guy is going to come. And lastly, this guy is going to come. So this is the answer. Ajay, clear? Just use the concept which we have learned previously, right? One is call stack. The second is the queue, which is maintained between JavaScript and the browser. Ajay, आपको clear है? Perfect. Okay, guys, so wonderful. Amazing to see so many right answers. It means we have actually understood the concept of set timeout, right? And this is the basic bread and butter of asynchronous programming. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So talking about async programming, we are now going to move to the next step, right? So guys, as of now, the concept of async programming that we know is only two things. We only know about, what do you say? The set timeout, right? So set timeout is the only, and of course, the document functions, which are the browser functions, are the only functions that we know will be executed asynchronously. Why? Because they are delegated to the browser. The browser, whenever it's ready or whenever some event happens, it's going to move it to the queue. JavaScript, when the call stack is empty, will read from the queue, right? Okay. So one problem that we face immediately when doing such things is, let me just give you, explain this with one example. Okay, so I'm just going to take the same example. So I'll say set timeout 1000, right? So just saying that after 1000 milliseconds or 1 second, console.log this, right? Suppose guys, after this happens, right after this happens, I want to queue another timer, right? So what am I going to write? I'm going to write set timeout. Again, console.log 2, and of course, then there is the time. And let's assume there is yet another one, right? So same thing I copy, and inside this set timeout, I place it, right? And this one I call high 3, right? Did we understand what I've just done here? Guys, are you able to understand this? Okay, let me just format this so it looks better. I just formatted this. Okay, so what does it say? It really says that, hey, set interval. I don't know what you're talking about, Pradeep, but okay. Anyway, here what is happening is after, so see, there is a chain of set timeouts here, right? So how it's going to work? The browser sees the first outside wala timeout, and it says that, hey, after 1000 milliseconds, I'm going to execute all of this. Okay. So after 1000 milliseconds or 1 second, we see console.log high, right? After that, the browser is again going to start set timeout, right? And after 1000 milliseconds, we are going to see high 2, right? And finally, when that guy also executes the high 2, then we are queuing another timer, right? So basically, at the first second, second, and the third second, we are going to see this. And we can try running this. Here, high 2, high 3. Everyone understood what we've just done? Great. Guys, now imagine we had yet another one, right? So what I'm going to do is just copy this guy, the innermost guy, copy this, paste it here, calling it high 4, right? Did we see what is happening is, and now if we run this, as you expect, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So right now we were just using these set timeouts, right? But in the real world, more than set timeouts, guys, our use case is going to rely around other things, right? So what are those other things? Those other things are getting data from a server, correct? So if you're building a website, you can't store everything here, right? Just consider a simple Google query. You need to get data from Google servers. It's not present in the UI, right? And JavaScript runs only on the browser. So what we are looking to do here is we are looking to fetch data from the browser, correct? Fetch data from a server using JavaScript, right? Now, typically what happens is if you have seen a certain forms, right? There are certain forms. I mean, I'm sure you guys have all faced this. So a form could be like this. It can ask you your name, email, right? And let's say the form is like this, guys, that when you write your name, it first verifies that whether the name is existing in our database or not, right? How are we going to do that? To check with our database, we need to make a remote call or a network call, right? To our server. Did we understand this? Verification can only be done in a network call to our server, right? And assume this, guys, that only when you have got a valid name, do you make the field of email visible, right? Basically, otherwise this element.style.display is none, and only when the network call is ready, you make this visible, right? Correct? Finally, same for email. The guy enters email. You do this and we verify the email also, right? Then let's say we ask for the address, right? So or simple pin code. And whenever the guy is entering the pin code, we don't want to ask the customer to fill their city and state. We will basically make an API call to our server or a network call to our server and fill those details, right? So network call to city and state, right? So this is a very common form use case. Did we understand what we're trying to achieve, guys? Right? Now, what we understand is each of these operations is async. Do we agree they are async? Because what did I tell you guys? The responsibility of making a network call belongs to the browser, right? And whenever the browser is doing something for us, we will basically request the browser, hey browser, whenever you are done, run a particular callback for me, correct? Now guys, imagine the same thing, right? So this is set timeout while a loop. Imagine the same thing, and a typical thing that we use to make network requests is something called as AJAX, right? And what does AJAX mean? It means asynchronous JavaScript, right? XML HTTP request. Don't get scared by the name. It basically means that it uses JavaScript to make a HTTP. What is HTTP? We know it's the protocol of internet. So every website is either http.google.com or something safer, HTTPS, which is just the secured version of HTTP, correct? So we use the functionality of AJAX for making remote calls or network calls to servers. Do we understand this? Right? So that concept is called AJAX, right? Now, in this case, and the way AJAX works is, I will not get into the details of it because, these are older things, guys, in JavaScript. No one uses them anymore, right? So we will talk about the modern concepts, but just wanted to introduce you the problem why we started using those modern concepts, right? So here it goes. Assume for making a network request to this guy, we have a server which is accessed by HTTP. myserver.com/verify name, right? And slash the actual name of the person, right? Whatever name they write in the field, right? We make this API call and we get the data. We get a verification. Okay, so let's say we had a function which was called AJAX. It's internally implemented. We won't worry how it works. Okay. What we need to tell this guy is, hey, AJAX on a particular endpoint, right? Because of course you need to tell it that, hey, I want to make a network request on a particular endpoint, right? Or a particular server name. And this is how we define a server name or a DNS. Anyway, not very relevant. Do you guys understand this? Folks, yes or no? अजय क्या नहीं समझ में आया? Amit, can you repeat for everyone once? Okay. Ajit, will you repeat today for everyone? No problem, Amit. Ajit, do you want to speak today? Okay, mic issue for everyone, huh? Okay. I'll only repeat it then. See, what I'm telling you is, what is AJAX? AJAX is a functionality which means asynchronous because it's made by the browser, JavaScript because that's the language you're using, XML HTTP request, right? What this means is you are using some functionality of JavaScript to make a HTTP request, right? What is the HTTP request? See guys, anytime you are opening a website, What do you write? You write this guy, or you write this guy. This is clear, right? So suppose ये तो हुआ ब्राउजर के टास्क बार से लिखने का guys. What if you want to make a call to your server from your code, from your JavaScript code, right? And this is a very common use case, as I explained in these three examples. All these three guys involve us making a API call or a network call to our server, correct? Do we understand this? So for those things, we use something called as Ajax in JavaScript. How it works internally, we will not get into the depth of it. The reason is it's not, guys, actively used anymore. It was a popular thing in the older days of JavaScript. So I want to touch on the concept, but not get too deep into it. So then the only thing I'm telling you is, suppose Ajax was a function, right? And whenever you said Ajax with the endpoint, right? And what is basically the endpoint means a URL, right? So let's say the customer entered their name, right? We had an event listener on the name, and whenever the name was complete, we made Ajax request to get the details of that name. So let's say the name was Amit. So that's how this request is going to look like. So basically what this is going to do is this is going to hit my server, which is this guy, with verify name and the value as Amit. Then my server is going to check, hey, my backend server is going to check, hey, do we have an entry by the name Amit? Can we verify it? And then, of course, it's going to return a response back to our JavaScript. Now, is this clear? Everyone? Ajay, Ankit? Okay. Okay, what is API? See, anytime that you're making... Okay, sure, Rahul. Anytime you are making a server call or a network call, right? Network call, a remote server. Remote server basically means something which does not lie on our machine, right? It's on the internet. So google.com is a remote server, correct? So these are also known as API calls in the common day-to-day language. That's why maybe I keep saying that word without realizing it, right? Network call equals API call. A call to a server on the network or a call to a server on the network are both called API call from JavaScript. Now clear? How we write these APIs, how they work internally is something that people learn in Node, right? Which is basically a backend server technology. So this is one of the ways, Siddiq, in which you can call, right? Wherein you have just passed the value here, right? So you must have seen in Google or other places, there are multiple ways to do this, right? Either we do something like this, right? So this is called a query parameter, or we write a path parameter, which can look like this. So either way is fine. Depends on how your backend server is handling it. Can we say database for that Ajax is required? Let's say here we want name or email. So see, where it's stored is not relevant, Sweta. See that because that basically comes in how you have implemented your backend, right? All we know here is we are making a network request to this guy. That's all we know, right? Using Ajax. How this server is handling it is something only the server can know, right? Maybe that server internally contacts a database, gets the data from DB or whatever. There could be many things, right? So all we know is this. Are we clear so far, guys? Right? Shall I move forward then? Okay, great. Now, since this is a callback based implementation, right? So what are we telling the browser? Hey, browser, you make a request to this guy from your side, and whenever you're done, and whenever you have the result of that request, just give me a call back. Just call this call back, right? And basically this is going to have a response, right? Simple enough, guys. Just like set timeout, but this time there was a network request. Again, set timeout was also handled by the browser. This guy is also handled by the browser, right? The concept is something like this, correct? So like I said, after we have made these API calls, what we're going to do is, let's say after we make the API call for name, now it's time to verify the email, right? But consider this, guys. Of course, in the response, I have to check, right, whether the name is valid or not. Suppose it gives me a valid field, right? So I can check response dot is valid, right? And only if that is the case, I want to make the next, I want to enable the email field, right? So some code to enable the user to write, or enable ki jagah we can say make email field visible for the user. And we can do this using JavaScript, correct? So some basically some document dot something to do that, correct? Right, guys? Guys, clear so far? Okay, then once this response is received, what we need to do is we are now trying to make a request for email, correct? So this time verify email, right? Email @gmail.com, let's say, right? And again, this guy is also going to return a response. Right? And again, we check if the email is valid. If response is valid, then make a request for pin code, right? How do you do that? You say verify pin code, right? Again, this guy also gives a response. And be some logic, autofill the end state. Right? Make this clean. Yes, of course, Vishal, you should be able to see it. How you can see it, you can simply say console.log, just like usual JavaScript. But not here, of course, because these are all dummy values, right? My server is a dummy value. These are all dummy things. We will be hitting a real original server today, don't worry. Okay. The problem with such implementation, guys, is, do you see what is happening? In this case also, as the level of nesting, or as you keep writing more and more inside each callback, right, the code is sort of drifting to the right, correct? So now when I write a set timeout, that will be drifted to more right, right? And this will be drifted to more right, right? Basically, the problem we are facing is readability, right? Now, this is not easy code to read. Are you guys not facing a problem with reading this, folks? Right? So suppose I was someone who's reading this code for the first time, right? This is very hard to understand, guys. Right? So, I mean, right now it's small, but it's not going to be small forever, right? If you follow this pattern, the problem is with the pattern. Whenever you have a callback based pattern, as you keep going deeper and deeper, readability is going to take a hit. Right? Now imagine there were a few other things that we were doing with the validity of response. Right? Then of course this becomes very complex to read. Isn't it? Do you guys feel that? Right? So essentially, what we learned is callbacks or asynchrony lead to poor readability. Can I say this? Can I say this? Right. Also, one other problem is happening that this code, right? The code that you write inside one callback is only going to run when the previous callback is would have run, correct? Right? So guys, if I were to clean this up, correct? If I were to clean this up, yes, one is dependency is there. Second, readability is a problem. And see, dependency is always going to be there, right? Because the form is tailored that way. Dependency is not a problem. The way we are writing the code is a problem, right? Okay. Now, having said that, and one more problem, guys, which I wanted to highlight, right? So let's say there was some code below this, right? Few lines of code below this. And of course, all of this was placed in run me function. Correct? And let's say there was inside run me only, for example, let's say there was some other code. Right? So by your judgment, guys, which code is going to get run first? Is this code going to get run first or the above code? When we call run me, which is the code which is going to run first? Below or top? The below code, right? Naturally. अरे यार मैं क्यों बोलते रहते हो इतना गलत यार? ये कॉलबैक्स तब चलेंगे ना भाई जब ब्राउजर रिस्पॉन्स देगा तभी तो ये कॉलबैक आएगा. एसिंक्रोनी है क्या? और these callbacks are only going to run now when the browser is going to respond, because this is asynchronous code. Call stack execution सब भूल गए मैं. Guys, is there a doubt with this? Which code is going to run? This code, below one or above? Below or above? Please write on your chart. Below, right? So one problem that I see with such an implementation, guys, is whenever I'm calling run me, right? Whenever I'm calling run me, the code that I write afterwards, runs before the code that I write usse pehle, isn't it? Now, you guys know that how the event loop, how the the browser internally works. But let's say I am new to JavaScript. Isn't this causing a lot of confusion? Whenever I'm calling run me, I would expect this code to run first. But what's going to happen is this code is going to run first. And this could be where major business logic lies. Correct? So we can for sure tell that, hey, the callback variant of writing code, asynchronous code, does not work well, right? For a number of problems, right? Poor readability, right? One more problem that I like now is, let's call it unintuitive, right? Because see, very simply speaking, whatever I write first should run first. Whatever I write afterwards should run afterwards. Correct? So there is a big problem here. Okay. Your mic creating some problem. Are you guys facing problem with my mic? Yes or no? No? Okay, I think it's your internet then. Okay, great guys. Okay. So just to solve this, by the way, this problem is called callback hell, right? Or it's also known as pyramid of doom, right? Why pyramid? Because if you, just look at this. If you keep adding more and more logic inside it, it's going to look like a pyramid, right? As it keeps going wider and wider, it looks like a pyramid. right? And as the pyramid gets wider, chances of making errors, making mistakes also go up, right? So do we understand the problems that callback cause, right? Okay, great. Guys, to solve this problem and this problem only, JavaScript introduced one concept, right? This is so that is the reason these days very few people are talking about Ajax. Yes, Amit, and we will also not talk about it in the future. Gone are the days of Ajax. Right? So we understand the problem, right? Okay. Now, what are promises? So the answer for solving all of this, the ES6 version of JavaScript, right? The ES6 version of JavaScript released in 2015, right? Released, they introduced a new feature which is called promise, right? Promises were released as a feature in JavaScript in 2015, and they were definitely actually released for solving the problem of callback hells, right? Right. So what are these promises? Okay. So guys, one thing that we need to understand is in this type of situation, we write the code right now, but the response gets available in the future. Correct? Correct. When I say future, it could be 2 seconds, it could be 3 seconds, whatever. But see, the difference between async and sync is only this much, right? If I write an array, I say dot map on it, EL start to something, right? The result of this line is going to be immediately available after this line, right? But the result of this guy is not going to be available until sometime in the future, right? Basically, you will need to make a network call to the server, the browser will have to do some work, and then only the data will be available, correct? Yeah, everyone? So when the reason these things, the solution was called promise or promises, because what is a promise in simple words? It's a promise to call back in the future. So things or objects whose value becomes available in the future is called a promise in JavaScript, very plain words, right? These promises, they can have multiple states, right? So any promise, guys, can be in 4 states, right? Either the promise could be pending. Second, if there is some failure, the promise is known as rejected, right? If everything works well, the promise is said to be in a state called fulfilled, right? And lastly, one state which represents fulfilling and rejection both is called settled, right? So these are the 4 states of a promise, right? Okay, but what is this promise? I'm pretty sure you guys are all thinking about the same question. We're talking about states and stuff, but what is promise, right? Okay, so in very simple words, promise is an object. No surprise there, guys. This is JavaScript, so objects, right? But it's a special type of object, right? It's a constructor-based object. And when I say constructor-based object, what can we say about it? How are we going to create a promise? Anyone? How do we call constructor functions? Perfect. क्या आंसर दे रहे हो यार? ये भाई सही. New, right? And let's try that out then. Shall I try that out here in my code? Okay. So I know something is called as promise. I'm going to say new promise, right? And let's just store it in T or let my promise equals new promise, right? Let's do that. Okay. It's saying the resolver is undefined, right? And why is it saying that? Let's understand that, guys. So the promise constructor expects a callback, right? And what should that callback have? That callback should have a resolver, right? What is resolver? Resolver is a function. Okay, so if I were to rectify this, this is all this guy is telling me. It's telling me, hey, inside this constructor, please provide a callback. Okay, so I provide a callback, right? And the parameter for this callback is, I mean, of course, you can name anything here, but it's what is called as resolve, right? And that's what is going to constitute the resolver. So this function that we give inside is called the resolver. And of course, I'm just going to say console.log resolver inside it. And now I'm just going to create this promise. Okay, I press enter. Okay, and what do we see? We see this guy getting logged, right? And if you check my peep, guys, what is it telling us? Can you guys see this? Pending. And so what it means is, what is the state of this promise? It's in pending state. And how do you change the state is the question now, right? So for changing the state, this resolve, right, that we passed into it is further a function. Okay, so resolve is a function. And this is the one which determines the state of a promise, right? So when I want to set the promise to resolve or fulfilled, I can simply call the value with resolve. Resolve, let's say. Okay, let's see what happens now. I create this, right? And now if you look at it, what is the state of promise? It's not pending either. What is the state of promise? Fulfilled. Why did, and fulfilled has a message also. What is the message? This is the message, right? So guys, using promises essentially gives us a way to handle asynchrony better. And how we do that, let's try to understand this. So the only knowledge that I've given everyone right now is there is something known as promise. It's a constructor-based function. It takes a callback. The callback further has a parameter which is called resolve. Whenever you call this resolve on anything, it will change the state of the promise to resolved. If you don't call this, the state will be pending. Is this clear? Right? Nothing complicated we've said so far. Okay. Now, how this helps. Let's understand that. Okay. So this helps like this. Okay, but before I tell you that, every promise that you create, right? Every promise. So my P was one promise. It has one property. So it's an object, right? It's an object, and objects have properties. So by one more definition, promises are enable. Right? What that means is have a property then, right? Let's understand how that works. So whenever I have my P, which is a promise, as we know, because we can create that promise, I can say dot then on it, right? And what is then? It's a callback. Right? And whenever the promise is in a resolved state, my P or your promise is going to execute this callback. Okay. So whenever it's fulfilled or whenever it's fulfilled is the word we use, right? Which means whenever it is resolved, we are going to get a callback here. Callback is a simply function. So I'll say so.log r. Right. And in this case, it's going to tell you I'm resolved. Right? So special types of objects used to handle asynchrony. How they are used to handle asynchrony, we'll talk about that. But two properties they have. One is they have these 4 states, and these states can be changed here by providing the data in this, by providing some values in this function. Guys, we have got to stop asking these questions. It's a variable, yaar. Amit लिख दूं यहाँ पे? See, don't ask. Whenever I give variable names, why do you guys get so puzzled? The point that I'm trying to make is whenever you call .then on a promise, right? If it's resolved, then it executes this callback. If it is not resolved, then this callback will not be executed. That's all I'm saying. Right? But in this case, there was no element of asynchrony, guys. There was no element of asynchrony because जैसे हमने ये create किया, हमने resolve कर दिया, right? No, this thing is a Sunny, confused mat ho, please. Okay, so now let's introduce the element of asynchrony, shall we? Shall we introduce the element of asynchrony? Okay, it's very simple. Okay. Okay, how do I do this? Again, I'm going to create a promise. Okay, but this time I'm going to give a call to resolve after 3 seconds. How can I do that? How can I give a call to resolve after 3 seconds? Set timeout. Perfect. So I say set timeout. Call this guy. How many seconds do I want to call it after? 3 seconds. Okay. Guys, does it work? Okay. And now what I'm going to do is in the next line, I'm going to say my p dot then x, or let me call it result, otherwise you guys will confuse about the variable. Okay. Right. And before this guy executes, I'm just going to console.log my p also. Okay. Reloading the browser and everything, writing this code, right? Please look very carefully. Okay. I'm going to hit enter and execute this code. I'm going to hit enter and execute this code. Please look very carefully. What is the state of promise here? Pending. And after 3 seconds, what happened here? Guys, did we see this? Everyone, right? The promise. Okay, let me show you again, right? This time, but let's focus on this. When I'm going to write this, at the time of writing this, when I say console.log myp, what is the status? What is the status? Nagesh. Here it is in pending state, correct? Once it reaches the resolved state, which happens after how many seconds? How many seconds does it happen after? 3 seconds. Only then, see, that's why this word, only then the callback executes. Correct? Correct? So it is giving us a better way to deal with asynchrony, right? Here, there could also be, now what we could have done here is, right, Rahul. So whenever, see, promise internally works like this. Whenever there will be a call to resolve, it is going to execute all the dot then on that particular promise. Okay? And whenever this call is made, the promise is marked as resolved. Right? Before this call, the promise is marked as pending. Are we clear, everyone? I will show the input again, Ajit. Pehle concept samjho. Right? Okay. So let's go again. Okay. What I have done in these 3 lines, I'm creating a new promise, storing the value in my p. Okay. So by default, when this MyP is created, what is the state of this promise? What is the state of this promise? Pending, correct? Only after 3000 milliseconds, the resolve function of that promise is getting called, right? So after 3 seconds, the state of this promise is going to be resolved, right? So even if I don't put this, right? Even if I don't put this and I check the state after of MyP after 3 seconds, it's still going to be resolved, right? But this gives me a way to run some function whenever the state changes to resolved. Got it? Are we clear? Yes. So now we are going to execute this again. Please ध्यान से देखना. Promise is pending. After 3 seconds, I'm resolved. Right? Now let's forget about the then part. I'm just going to remove this guy. Right? I'm going to remove this guy also. I hit enter. I show you MyP. It's in pending state, right? I think 3 seconds have passed. I show you MyP. What is the state of that promise? Resolved. So did we understand how it's working? Right? So guys, this was a brief introduction to promise and how it can help us deal with asynchrony better. I will open the floor to questions now because I won't be going any further, at least for today. Like I promised, we'll keep it short. If rejected occurs, then I'll talk about it tomorrow, Shubham. It's the same thing. Basically, as you have resolve, you have reject also, which is nothing but the second parameter of it. I'll talk about it tomorrow. For now, just try to understand the concept of promises, the concept of states. Why was the result there beside then, since result has no value? Why was the result there beside? I'm not getting your question, Siddiq. Where is the variable result? Where is the variable result? No, what is the question, Siddiq? Ask the question now first. Okay, inside dot then are you talking about? Cool. See. Whenever a promise is resolved, what did I tell you? It's going to execute the dot then callback. Do we understand this? Yes or no? Right? Inside this, whatever you want to write, right? The value of this X or this variable is going to be filled by the promise. Whatever you pass and resolve is going to be the value of this guy after so much time. After so much time, because we are using set timeout. So if I do this, then after 3 seconds, I'm resolved is going to be the value of X. It takes the resolved value. Since it's then, X is going to be filled by the resolved value. No, it's like this. Rahul, whenever you create a promise, right? Whenever you call this guy, the resolve function, whenever you call this, at that time, the state of the promise is set to be resolved. And when does this function run? This function runs immediately when we create a promise, right? It's just that when we write dot then to this promise that we created, whenever the promise gets resolved, right? Which is in this case, 3 seconds. And that time it's going to run this callback. That's it. Absolutely right, Gaurav. After 3 seconds, so it's not like 3 seconds, it's whenever this result gets called, the then executes. That's it. What is the use of promise? The use of promise is to simplify asynchrony. is to simplify asynchrony. That's why these things were released. The concept of promises, guys, is now used to simplify asynchrony, right? So Ajax also now comes in a promise based flavor, right? And that promise based flavor is something called as fetch. Okay. So guys, what is fetch? Okay. So I just wanted to cover one more concept. Nothing. I mean, for promises, we'll stop here. We know a promise can be in pending state when it's created, or it can be in fulfilled state whenever it's resolved. Correct? Do we understand these two? Right? Correct. Now, using this information, I wanted to talk about network calls also today, right? And of course, promise is something that we will carry on tomorrow. Okay. So guys, up until now, we just saw that, hey, there is something called as Ajax, which works like something, right? Right? So I want all of you to try this. I'm just going to give you guys a URL, and I want you guys to try to open that in your browser, if you're in front of a laptop, of course. Just getting you that URL, guys, 1 second. Okay, just open this URL. Open this URL. I want everyone to open it. We'll take a pause for 1 minute.